p.m. And I'm calling the meeting of the Transportation Advisory Committee of Concord to order. And let's see, we will, just since we were talking about members before the meeting started, I'll just mention that Mark Galis, who's been observing our committees for a while, will be observing tonight. Has he been voted on by the, was he voted on last night by the select board?
He was nominated.
Mark Galis?
Yeah, nominated, not approved.
You're nominated, but not approved. Okay.
It takes 2 meetings.
Takes 2 meetings. Okay, great. So Mark will be joining us once he goes through the process and gets sworn in by the town clerk. And that's that on membership. And as we said, Josh, who we thought was joining us, won't be joining us, Josh Lee. And moving on, we have no minutes to approve this time, right, Phil?
My bad, but I will get them for you the next time. I apologize.
Okay, good deal. And chair's report. Let's see. Well, we do have a new town manager. I'm sure everyone knows by now that Carrie LaFleur has been sworn in as the town manager, and to the approval of everybody, I believe. And let's see what else.
She's the weekend and she hasn't left yet, so I think we're good.
The thing is, she knew what it was like, right? At least she knew what she was walking into. Let's see. I've been having some discussions with Ellen Cathcart, Public Works Director, about Public Works budgeting, just to help and support him in getting the budgeting going, which kicks off in September. There's a little bit of an issue on his side because they weren't planning on having any Public Works Commission meetings in the summer. They usually don't unless there's a special need. So I think he's trying to figure out exactly what to do about that. And ARPA funding. I'm going to wait. I did not see I saw a previous select board meeting. I did not see last night's. At the previous meeting, there was talk of $200,000 of ARPA funding for transportation projects, programs, and that seemed at the time to be very well supported by the select board members. There was a discussion last night that I did not witness. So when Erin can give us an update on that in a moment. Why don't you go ahead and do that now, Erin? Whatever
Sure.
you witnessed.
So I also was not there, but I was looking over the packet and I spoke briefly with Michael Gibbons, who's the select board's administrator. And I was looking through the packet, and from the previous meeting, from the June 27th meeting, there's a listing of some different funding that they're considering for ARPA, I believe. And it set aside $35,000 for Complete Streets Plan update. Terry, please correct me if I'm wrong, as well as $450,000 for transportation programs. So not quite sure what the transportation programs mean. That could be something that is being discussed in the future. But those were the 2 things that I saw, along with the $200,000 for transportation, which I think my assumption is that those were sort of the earmarked things, and then the other ARPA funds that I just listed, the $35,000 and the $450,000, are for maybe future, looking at the next couple of fiscal years, because there's going to come in several waves, the ARPA funding.
Yeah, and I would say at the previous select board meeting, one thing that was clear, at least one select board member, and it seemed to be supported by others, had said that whatever the funding is, they thought they would be looking to the Transportation Advisory Committee for advice on how to spend the money. So that's something, an important thing that we'll have to deal with. I would expect we would do that in the context of the roadmap that we've already presented to the select board. Of course, it can be changed as we get wiser, but basically that's our plan of the moment. So that's where we start with any discussion on priorities. Let's see, what else? Scenic Roads. Yes.
I'll just add, we didn't really talk about ARPA last night at the select board meeting. It wasn't on the agenda. So Erin's correct. We talked about it at the previous meeting. So if you saw that meeting, you're probably up to speed. And you're right, we definitely want to get the input from Transportation Committee on the details of how to spend it, using your roadmap and whatever updates you have on that. Working with Alan, that's great. And the only thing that came up last night that I can think of is when the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail people came in, they had 3 recommendations on 2 on Junction Park, short-term, long-term. And the third one was to work on safety improvement enhancements at the railroad crossing in West Concord, which was something, Nick, that you also had mentioned. So then I brought up that grant, and seems to be a lot of support for that.
Yes, Aaron and I were talking about that today, and we both separately realized that there's a big problem with that, which is that I don't think the town can move to get that grant because that's MBTA property, MBTA right of way. And I think we're in the position that if we think that needs to be done, we're back to where we were, which is needing to convince the MBTA that it's important enough and that now there's money available, that they should go for the money with our support. Because I don't see how we can make a proposal to get a grant on property we don't own or control.
Where, could I ask you, where are you talking about? Are you talking about?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. We should give you some background. So what happened was about a week ago or 10 days ago, Terry became aware of a large grants available from the federal government for railroad crossing safety. I don't remember if it was just safety, but improvements. And I eagerly, given what we were looking at with Sudbury Road and the intersection with Thoreau Street, I became excited about it and said, oh, we got to figure out what it'll take to do that. And I think Terry did too. And, just now we've hit with the realization of, oh, we're back to where we were with trying to get a platform at Concord Depot, which is that, all we can do is try to persuade the MBTA that, hey, this is really important and it's an opportunity. So,
Yeah, so
and the one that came up last night was the one in West Concord, which might have the same problem. But it seems to me that, yeah, if the MBTA owns the property, they would have to do it. But if it's something that we control, like property near it or connecting it to the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail or the intersection at the depot with traffic light or.
Yeah, but the thing is, as I recall, when the design was being done for the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail in West Concord, it was hell negotiating with the MBTA to get any kind of crossing there, right?
Right.
So, we're really, whatever we try to do, they have to agree to it because of railway safety. Right.
yeah, and I mean, it could be something that if we, if it was brought to them and we could work with them to complete the grants, but working with the MBTA would be the first step to see if they'd be willing to sort of play ball, and then we could go from there. But that's really sort of the first step is to talk to them and see if they're willing to consider it, especially if there's money available. So that'd be a larger conversation.
Yeah, we need some leverage with the MBTA, Terry. If there's anyone on the select board or, anyone in town government who can help us get there. I mean, I think I've heard that, we brought up this issue before of, platform and at the Thoreau Depot. And, they basically said, hey, we've got issues in other towns. You already have a platform, go away.
Right. There is one person who has a lot of influence with the MBTA, and that is not Welch from the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. He somehow had a meeting with the head engineer. I'll shoot him an email and see if anything can be done.
Thank you.
Isn't that, Nick, is that the crossing where there was a fatality already?
Yeah, that occurred to me today too. The one on Sudbury Road, there was a fatality there quite a few years ago, 5 or 10 years ago, I think. I recall it was a woman. I don't remember any details about
It
it.
was just about 3 years ago.
Was it that recent?
Yeah, 3 years ago.
Yeah. So, yeah, so I mean, that's another thing we can put on the table with a discussion with the MBTA. Hey, that's a dangerous place. Okay, let's see.
I just want to let you guys know, I'm turning my video on and off. I'm having some technical issues, so I just want to let you know that that's what's going on over.
Okay, great, thank you. Let's see, to finish my report, just tried to get, I got some clarification from the town clerk's office about member status, things like what's a liaison and what can a liaison do, and what are the different categories of membership. So just for background information, I have a document that there's a place on the website. If you're interested in that, let me know and I'll send you a link that I got to the website that explains it. But basically, you can have liaison who just participate in the meetings. You can have people who actually have voting rights in the meetings. And but that would be a special arrangement that have to be, I think, in my opinion, a very good reason for doing that.
I'm sorry, can you just repeat your sentence? Because I lost the internet and I've fixed it now, but I've lost the internet for a second.
I was saying I got some clarification from the town clerk's office about the issue of different categories of membership, like liaison and other types. Liaison don't vote, they just participate in discussions and provide information. And you can have full voting members who are from other committees, but that's not a usual arrangement. And I think that's it for my report. Is also, when we do Safe Routes to School, Phil and I had a discussion with someone today, and Phil will cover that. We'll talk about it then. And
Can we clarify what the next steps were on the sort of Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, Junction Park, MBTA? Like, is there a next step that somebody's taking out of that discussion? Just
there was Terry said that they presented their findings to the select board last night, and there were 3 points in it. The third of which was that they felt the need for safety improvements related to the actual train track crossing of the train tracks. And so there's a need there that's perceived by that group. And that just took us to a discussion of trying to get the MBTA to do things like improvements to the Thorough Depot area and putting in a platform and improving traffic in that area and safety. So,
and do we have a contact at the MBTA, Aaron?
Terry said there is someone on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail that does have some sort of relationship, at least with MBTA engineering. So we're going to pursue that. Or
okay,
Terry,
great.
that person will pursue that.
Sorry, I missed a couple of things while my internet was going in and out.
That's okay. Better to know than wonder. Okay, staff update. Erin, you've been doing a lot of things as usual.
Keeping busy, that's for sure. So the trolley, you might have seen it around town. It is up and running. It started just at the beginning of July. We are very excited. We did a soft launch so that we could sort of work out the kinks and make sure that the drivers felt comfortable with the routes before having hopefully a large onslaught of people all clamoring to get onto the trolley and experience Concord. So we have had a sort of slow start, but we're starting to really kick it off. And ridership seems to be picking up a little bit, even after just a couple of days now. We're seeing that people are starting to figure it out and starting to notice that they're asking questions. They're saying, we're getting school groups that are saying, is there a way for us to bring our whole school group? And we say, absolutely, jump on. So we're really excited to see how that's going. We were able to get the shuttle wrapped and it's following the fixed route. And the drivers are very excited. They keep telling us how much they love driving the route because it's just so beautiful here in Concord. And so far it's going well. And we're keeping the marketing going to let people know what's going on. We just sent out a press release. I sent it to my contact at the Globe. So hopefully they will want to pick it up and see it for themselves. I invited them to come take a ride. So those were the big updates for the trolley. I also submitted a Bottleneck Grant. So that was for the Sudbury and Thoreau Depot. We should find out in about 1 to 2 months about that. What's interesting about that grant is that you don't submit for a specific project or design. You submit saying, hey, we have some sort of a problem. We don't know what it is. Can you come take a look at it? Tell us what you think, and then decide if we need funding. So we're in the beginning stages of that. Hopefully they will see merit in our application, and they will come out and take a look and then say, great, we have a simple and easy fix, and we're gonna give you all the funding that you need for it. So that's what we're hoping for. We'll see how that goes. And those are sort of my big updates. We are working on the FLAP grant. That's the Federal Land Access Program. That's through the National Park with Lexington and Lincoln. That's due at the beginning of August. And
Say
yeah.
just a little bit about that one. What is the scope of it?
Sure. So that is to have basically a shuttle program similar to the one we're doing right now, but it will continue through Lexington and Lincoln, linking up with the national park. So people will be able to travel through all three towns. And so it'll be essentially an extended service. What we're doing right now is a part of what, it's basically one leg of the journey. So it will be linked together with a couple of other spaces so that people can travel throughout the area, throughout the region. We're working with the other two towns and the national park on that. Seems to be going well, and we are hoping that we think we have a really strong case for it, and having the shuttle be supported by the town is a big piece of that too, to show that there's community support. Lexington also has a similar program with their Liberty Ride. It's slightly different in that it's a paid tour, but it's a similar idea in that it's looking regionally at the area. So we're hoping that we have the background to really propel this forward, and we've also done a feasibility study in the past couple of years to show that there's a need. So we're hopeful that that we'll be successful in getting that grant, and that is to cover 3 years of service for the shuttle. So it would go through 2025, which we're expecting to see a whole bunch of people come to Concord. In the past and in other communities that were also support historical national parks, they've seen increases of up to 200,000 people over just a couple month period, and that'd be a lot of extra cars on the road if we were to have everybody come by car. So we're really trying to find other ways to get them around 2025. So yeah, so look forward to hopefully having that good news.
Aaron, where would be the common changeover points between the various trolleys?
So there's a couple off the top of my head, because I'm so stuck in this trolley. But off the top of my head, I know that one of them is the Northbridge Visitor Center. There's also, I believe, going to be one at the Lexington Visitor Center and the Concord Visitor Center. So there's a couple of common touch points, and I believe that there's also one in Lincoln. So there's essentially a sort of a east-west route and north-south, which doesn't quite line up because we're very linear, but that's kind of the way that it's going to work. It's all available on the under the transportation and mobility under planning. It's the feasibility studies listed there, and the decision was to go with scenario 2. So if you read scenario 2, that has the general outline.
Is there any issue with one being paid and one being not paid?
What do you mean by paid and not paid?
Well, you said the
said
Lexington one is
The
paid.
Lexington one, there's a charge for it?
Oh, so this shuttle would be similarly either low or no cost. So it could be that there's a small fee because you will be traveling so far between the 3 towns. And there could be some sort of a tour guide or something like that. That hasn't quite been worked out. Probably not. It'll probably be more just for transportation. But it will be a lower no cost option. That is what is expected, as opposed to the Lexington Liberty Ride, which is more of a you get on, there's somebody in costume giving you a full historical tour as you travel along. You get off, the bus waits for you. You go and you do a little walk around or just explanation of the place. Then you hop back on with the same group of people and continue on. So it's more of a historical tour and less of a transportation option.
So this program would just be one thing that runs from Lexington through Lincoln to Concord, and each town will have its own shuttle or trolley or whatever.
So we're thinking of having 3 or 4 shuttles that are essentially running continuously, so that's it's not a very long wait in between any of them, but they'll be running on they're sort of 2 north-south, 2 east-west is kind of the thought.
Okay.
So
Good.
quick question, Erin, where is the feasibility study located?
If
said there
you
was
go to the planning division under departments,
Okay,
there's a transportation and mobility section, and it's under there.
and I have a quick question. Is the National Park Service a part of this at all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They've been one of the leading charges on this. So they've been sort of the point place, if you will. And everybody is, we're all working together to put this together.
Yeah, Marcia Rasmussen's been working with the National Park Service on this program and other concepts for it for about 3 or 4 years at least.
Yeah.
Okay.
Laura?
I'm curious, so it sounds like this grant that you're applying for is very specifically about like land access and sort of parks. And so I'm curious if, let's say we get the grant, the program starts running, if there are identified needs that are not being met, for instance, a stop at the high school so that the high school kids can use it to get to after school activities. I'm just making up a hypothetical that I can imagine. Is the grant relatively narrowly defined, or is it something that we can tack on other things to? I'm just curious how it will work if it were to go through.
Yeah, so it is fairly narrowly defined because it is essentially through the national park is the only reason that we can apply for it. So it has to be, it's places that are linked to the national parks or like economic centers that feed into the national park. So for instance, Concord Center can be a part of it because it is part of that sort of historic nature of the national park. So while it's not technically part of the national park, the history plays into it. And so we can have those stops, but I don't think that we could include something like the high school, for instance, because it's
Or the hospital or the senior center or.
Yeah, those would be something separate, I think.
Okay. I just was curious how it might all fit in with a larger picture, but that's good to know.
Yeah, there is it is, I don't know the specifics about what is allowed and what is not allowed, because we've been more focusing on just trying to figure out the language to make it perfect for submittal, if you will. So I haven't really dug down into the details of what would and would not be an appropriate use, if you will. That could be something that we figure out later on, but scenario 2 has all the details laid out in the feasibility study.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Okay. So that's it on on trolleys and buses. Sidewalk sale, Laura and Erin.
Actually, before we move on, I did have one question because we moved on from the trolleys update. You said that there was a soft launch. Is there a launch event that we should be declaring as a meeting so we can all go to it or something like that?
That hasn't been officially defined yet. We've been talking about having one, and we have a possible venue for said launch, but it hasn't been actually planned yet. I think that because we tried to get it off the ground so quickly, now we're, trying to get our feet back under us, catch up on all of our work for the past couple of weeks. At least I know I am. I have quite a few unread emails still. But I think that we're definitely looking to have some sort of a launch event so that if nothing else, we can sort of celebrate this, this monumental thing in transportation here in Concord.
Do you have a sense of late June, early August, late August, kind of general?
My guess would probably be beginning of August, but that's just purely based on Nothing really, just my intuition.
No worries. Thanks.
Okay. Whoops, dog barking. Okay, on to the sidewalk sale. I may mute for a moment.
So Laura, do you want me to start off and then you can jump in? Okay, great. So, so the sidewalk sale is August 6th, and it is in downtown Concord Center on Walden and on Main Street. So the businesses come out, community groups come out, and it's about getting down into the town center and being a part of the community and supporting shopping local. So we had this idea, I should say, Laura brought it to me, and we both had the same idea separately about doing some sort of a transportation table or some sort of a something to get people thinking about transportation. And we thought that this might be a good venue for it because there's going to be people out and about and walking around. So I have secured us a table at on Walden Street so that we can have some sort of a table. My initial thoughts were to really get people talking about transportation and about how they want to get around Concord, how they currently get around Concord, what are the barriers that they're facing. My background is from, several jobs ago is teaching. And so I had sort of this kindergarten thought of what if we did sort of think of it almost like a board game, and there's, paper cutouts of bicycles and people walking and of cars and scooters, and say, okay, you live way over here in, near Barrel Farm. How do you get down to the town center? How do you want to get there? How do you currently get there? What are the barriers? And sort of talk through what are the options. Is it that you could ride your bike there? Is there a safe way? Do you feel confident doing that? Could you hop on the trolley? Is that an option for you? Could you take the Mbta? So sort of talking through those different options to start a conversation and really get people thinking about how they get around town, not just automatically jumping in the car, but thinking about, are there other options? But to also get people interested in transportation and thinking about this in the long term, especially as we look at sort of the connectivity between different spots in town and how people are, we're trying to promote multimodal, and this is a great way, we thought, to do it. So that was one of the thoughts. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Laura.
I'll just say, I just think doing something like that as a way of making our work, the Transportation Advisory Committee, as a, what we're trying to do, and a place that people can bring their ideas and thoughts and complaints or whatever about transportation, is a good byproduct of our participation there.
Erin, I think you did a great job of summarizing it. And I'm really excited for August 6th. The video that I came across that, I drew this idea from, Erin had thought about. Good ideas often happen to multiple people at the same time, I think. The idea that, or the video that I had watched was about a better block event, which is a little bit more of an expansive event, which, given that August 6th is a couple of weeks away and we don't have a meeting between now and then, I don't think that it's something feasible for August 6th. But I do want to just explain what a better block event might be, because I think it would be a really great event for us to put on, especially in collaboration with some of the other committees. Specifically, I'm thinking about the Comprehensive Energy and Sustainability Committee, since their mission is very education focused and they tend to run a lot of educational events. So they might be a great committee to pair with on this. But a better block event is more expansive than just one table at a larger event. It would be putting in, getting a bunch of cones and making a little bike lane on a whole block, and making a little outdoor dining area in front of, like, let's use Walden Street as an example, since that's where this particular event is, but like closing half of the street, allowing cars to come in, making a bike lane, making an outdoor seating area for Fiorellas or whatever business wants to participate, inviting various vendors to come and be in the space, having street games for kids to, like, giant chess is very popular at these kinds of events, those kinds of like large sort of town square games. And giving people a sense of what would it look like if we changed the layout of a street to include more opportunities for people to feel safe walking and biking and using other like small mobility devices to get around. And it's like all of it's temporary. It's just like a day-long thing. It's not paint on the ground. It's just a way of getting people to see the space and then have conversations about, does this feel good to you? Does this not feel good to you? And then you can collect data that way. So it's a much more ambitious project because it's running a whole event. We would need more space. We'd need to talk to the businesses about whether they were excited about doing this with us. So I think that I just want to bring that up as a planting a seed. We can see, how, maybe an opportunity for the fall or maybe next spring, especially as we prepare for more complete streets projects, and how do we have conversations with people about what do our complete streets look like? It might be a great way to, like, I'm a visual person, so I like seeing what it would look like. And I know other people do too. So that's kind of the idea of the Better Block event. And so what we might do on August 6th would be a very trimmed down version of that, to just have information and have conversation, but have less of the sort of space modifications for the purposes of demonstration.
Yeah, I think that a really good way to think about how these sort of events work is it's almost like a day-long pilot project. Because pilot projects are brought in, and they may use paint, they may use jersey barriers, or just trial of different things to see how people react. And do they love the outdoor seating? Do they love having a bike lane, or would they prefer to have the parking there? So it's having those sort of conversations, but on a much smaller scale, which I think is really interesting and really useful. Because pilot projects are always, they're a great way to test out a theory, but what if you can do it on a miniature scale? So I think it's a really, it's a really exciting idea and something that we should definitely think about for the future. And, when Laura brought it to me, I was like, this is perfect. This is very similar to what I was thinking about.
Yeah, I think they're both approaches are important. And one of the issues I know we're running into, or Public Works is running into, is trying to implement the limited scope of the Complete Streets grant that they got that included Hubbard Street. There's turning out to be some significant neighborhood resistance to anything beyond the way it is. And that's being worked. But I think that you're both putting your finger on something, which is we need that sort of involvement and participation. I think we need to proceed to doing some sort of community input, testing of ideas carefully and with Public Works and others who are involved. This reminds me of the whole Thoreau Depot proposed zoning change, which is a lot of people objected to it. And frankly, I don't think a lot of them were being straight about why they didn't like it. And it's really hard to get people to change. A lot of people come to Concord because they like it exactly the way it is. That's the street they bought their house on. That's the way the street looked. This is the way it's been. You want to come in and do what? You're going to take away parking spaces. You're going to paint lines. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. You're going to be colorful sidewalks. None of that's here. So I think what you're both talking about is really important. We have to draw people in and start these conversations and make them aware. And I don't have the answer exactly how to do that, but I think we really need to create the space where people can start to think about it at the very least and to understand. I think maybe what we need to be clear about is what some of our primary goals are, like safety, access for all, what our real objectives are in transportation programs, equity, all of that. Frankly, equity didn't get too far in the zoning proposal. So I think though we have to find have to articulate and put in front of the town what it is we think, where we're headed. Sustainability, equity, safety, things that, are very important, and to help people put that all in perspective along with their feelings about their neighborhood.
Thank
So-
you. I think you hit it on the head. We need to articulate the goals. The one thing that I will say is that we don't have to invent this idea from scratch. There are a lot of other communities piloting, like the Better Blocks event is a thing that many communities are doing. They have good ways of bringing in, like they do a lot of public art. They bring in the local art organizations to really sort of engage the whole community in a variety of ways. So I think that, I think your point to involving public works, involving other departments and other committees in town is great. It's one of the reasons why I think we should put this on our horizon and try to work towards it, because I think it would require a lot of collaboration. I mean, I'm the kind of person who wants to get things done quickly, so I'd love to try to for the fall, but maybe more realistically, something in spring around Earth Day, making it about our meeting our sustainability goals and our equity goals. If we give ourselves the lead time, we could really bring in a lot of groups about this.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, I think we've got to get those. I mean, we've articulated them many times, but I think we have to restate them in the context of the public roads specifically, and in a context that will help guide us through where we're about to go with complete streets and street redesigns. Terry?
I agree with that about the goals. There are a lot of people asking, what are the priorities that the Transportation Committee has? So definitely you guys could help all the folks out with that. I just wanted to mention to Laura, there are some other opportunities coming up besides this event in August. There's the Ag Day, which actually does close off part of Concord Center, as you probably know. And then there's Porch Fest that the arts groups do in West Concord. And we might be able to put together a whole list of these type of events, but you wouldn't have to start from scratch if you piggyback with another one of the committees that's already setting up this type of event.
Okay.
Yeah, if we're going to be in Concord Center, it seems like we should definitely do West Concord as well. Porch Fest sounds like a great idea in particular.
Is Porch Fest like other Porch Fests, where there's a lot about music on porches?
Yes.
Exactly what it is.
Dorchester just did one called a Dorch Fest. It was- Okay.
And the nice thing about the Porch Fest is that actually happens less in the downtown and more in the suburban. So it's more analogous to the Hubbard Street situation. So it might be a really interesting opportunity to build a complete street on one of those suburban, like just test out some designs on a suburban block, maybe even a couple, and get people to vote for it or something. You could really get people like invested in talking about the design choices.
You can do a lot with chalk and some cones.
Okay, I think what I should do is take on, to sort of pull out of the roadmap and other things we've done, sort of what those high level goals are that sort of set the context for how the roadways might evolve, what the priorities are, what the goals are, what we're trying to achieve, so that people can understand, not just feel threatened by change, but also understand what the good things we're trying to do with change, okay? What's important. So I'll do that. And so what are we going to do about this event on August 6th then? Who's going to do what? Erin, sounds like you're taking on yet more work.
I can't say no. If there's more work, I run towards it. So I think that if anybody wants to volunteer to come and talk to people, I think that'd be great. I think that the more, obviously I'm only one person and I can maybe, I can only grow maybe one other head before August 6th. So we might need a couple more people there to chat with other people.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to come. I will come, as long as there's not some horrible conflict I don't know about. And I would come basically to have conversations with people. to tell them about what we're doing and about some of these goals and other things and how that could play out and how do you feel about that and all of that. And if anyone else has their issues that they love in transportation on the committee, I'd say do the same thing. It's just our presence, I'd encourage all of you to be there, but our presence really matters, and engaging anyone in conversations to let them know what we're thinking about and draw them into the process. That's good.
And I think too, just to show people that there are other methods to, you can bike. Did you know about the bike share? Did you know about the trolley? Did you know that, there's these different connection points you may not be thinking about, or, to get people really thinking, I think is sort of the key driving factor to sort of jumpstarting transportation discussions in town.
Yeah, that brings us back to Laura's previous project, which was pulling together the list of all of the transportation stuff in town. I assume that's kind of on hold at the moment, Laura. You sort of took it to a point, and then we discovered there was lots more to it, right? Sort of, where does that stand?
I did meet with Aaron and
Joshua,
does he go by Josh or Joshua? Josh, 2 weeks ago, and then I got pulled into a big work project, so I haven't been able to follow up on some of that, but it is moving slowly forward. But I think that might be, even if we just had it in draft form.
Yes, exactly.
I think that because it may also be an opportunity for some crowdsourcing. There may be some things out there that we don't even know about that people are taking advantage of. Like, I often think like there may be apps that people are using for organizing carpools. Like, there's all sorts of things out there beyond the scope of my knowledge that I wonder.
What could you bring to the event that we could show people? Would it be pieces of paper? Would it be an iPad with something running on it? What could we show them?
Well, I do know that the town has some printing capacity. So having worked with the sustainability department a bit, I mean, as somebody who does a lot of tabling in my life, large things are often great for display. So it might be good to have, some kind of a graphic listing all of these different things that Aaron, you've already said, do you know about Mbta and trolley and Yankee bus and all these different things?
Well, more or less what you showed us before. I mean, I think that's great. If we can show them some version of that you think.
It'll just need to be in a more sort of visual format and a less text dense format.
I think it's more important to have the conversation and show them that it's rough thinking is fine. I don't think it has to be a finished product. I think we want to draw them into the conversation and say, this is one direction we're heading in. We'd love your input on it. What do you think is missing? What's good or bad about it?
Yeah, Laura, we can come up with some sort of like an infographic to jumpstart the conversation, like you're saying. And yeah, I mean, Nick, like you're saying, it doesn't have to be a finished product, and we can, sort of build off of it. I know that one of the things that Josh is working on is he's going to be putting together a lot of this into a web page with graphic representations of different things and linking to different information, so that we can sort of compile as much of it as we can into one place that we can build off of, so that people are more aware of the different transportation options in town, but also we can really get that message out there and say, hey, there's a spot where you can go and look. We've compiled it all for you. If you know of other options, please let us know. We're more than happy to add them. This is just our starting point.
I would be very happy to volunteer myself. Aaron, you and I can find a time to meet. I know we had a meeting fall through last week, and I apologize for that, but we can find a time to meet between now and the 6th and come up with some engagement tabling activities. And I think we've already kind of captured it here, but just to summarize, like, Nick, it sounds like you're going to be working on what are our overarching goals, safety, sustainability, equity, access. I would add to that, speed reduction. I think that's important to a lot of people. Car speed reduction. Some people care a lot about noise reduction. So we could put, I actually would be curious at this August 6th event to put priorities out there and ask people to vote on them. Like, what are your top priorities? It might be good data for us. And I would maybe, Aaron and I can.
I would say do whatever you want that day. Just show up. The important thing is show up you know, engage in conversations, you know, provide some context for discussion, you know, collect some input from people, fine. I mean, we're not going to get back structured input that we can act on, right? We want to begin the conversation. We want to pick up some thoughts. We want to involve people, and, you know, a little bit of crowdsourcing. We'll probably learn some things we didn't know. That's good.
Yeah, well, if it wasn't clear, I'm volunteering to be there on the 6th, and I'm volunteering to help Erin produce some, you know, maybe materials for the table ahead of time.
Right. Okay, great. I really like that one about whatever you did before in terms of an infographic or whatever, just showing the variety of services that are currently available. The bike share, the Concord, the trolley, you know, commuter rail. We've got all of these things that people need to know about. And, you know, when you presented it, there was stuff there. We learned stuff, all of us. It was good.
Perfect.
Okay. So I think that's good. So August 6th, please show up if you can. And moving on, oh, go ahead, Laura.
Just a procedural question. If it's just you and me going, we don't need to declare it as a town meeting?
It's not a meeting. We're just showing up at something. We're not, I don't think.
If there's a quorum, if there was going to be a quorum present, or if we think there might be, we should declare just in case. But we can post that later, or if, you know, most people say that they can't be there and it's only the two of you, then that's okay.
Okay, so let's do this, please. Erin, if you could just send out an email about a week before, find out who's coming. If we've got a quorum, then post it as a meeting. The only purpose of the meeting is to, whatever, engage the company, the residents, and have discussions about transportation.
Great.
Okay. So, okay. Then moving on to complete streets, best practices discussion.
Back to me.
You again.
So this is going to probably be a shorter discussion than we had originally thought, or I had originally thought, simply because after looking through the select board packet from the 27th, I realized that maybe looking at our complete streets overarching plan and sort of those connection points, which we know isn't necessarily the most connected that it could be, and that there's a lot of room for improvement. We weren't sure how far down the line that was. We've applied for several grants, which we haven't gotten for technical assistance to do that. But with, I assume that this $35,000 for a complete streets plan renewal would cover this. So it's back sort of in our sights, probably not immediately, but coming up quickly. So I don't want to necessarily be doing something like putting together best practices when we'll likely be working with some sort of a firm or company a consultant that will help us to do that again. So don't want to be redoing work. So one of the things I thought would be good, instead of just having a best practices discussion, is to sort of talk about where the TAC sees itself in terms of how do you want to be going forward involved in the complete streets process. I believe that when going through the plan renewal, that the TAC will want to be very involved in that process and taking a look at what complete streets means, what the consultant says the best practices are, is there sort of a range, how do they make those decisions, and how do we go about making sure that the town we take a comprehensive look at the town. So I think that is one thing that the TAC will probably want to be involved in. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's going forward. Does the TAC want to be sort of the sounding board, or, you know, what is the role that the TAC wants to play in complete streets moving forward? I wanted to gather sort of your input so that we can have a larger discussion at the staff level and kind of go from there.
Well, I'll jump in because I always do. I'm a little bit concerned about design or best practices getting ahead of what the residents are ready for. So my worst nightmare is we spend a whole bunch of money. We come out with beautiful, drawings of how the intersections and the roadways could look. And we meet incredible resistance from every neighborhood in town about doing that. So I think that's the first thing. And I see that as part of the Complete Streets program and project, is to, again, articulate the goals of transportation, what we're trying to achieve, and then, begin that discussion. I don't know how we do this, but I saw a consultant help us do that when we developed the town's long-range plan, which is engaging the citizens. And it wasn't cheap. I think it was, well, the whole thing, including writing the long-range plan, was over $100,000, maybe 150. It was a lot of money. So, but engagement is part of that. And I think engaging with the citizens to make sure everybody in town, not everybody, but the town in general, a sufficient number of people who attend town meeting are on board about, what complete streets would mean, or what a sensible, safe design would mean.
Yeah, and if I can just comment on that, I think that obviously, we need to be sure that going forward, anything that, any projects that are brought forward, it's brought to the community before the project begins, before anything is applied for, so that they understand what Complete Streets is and sort of what the process is, what this means. Because we want to be sure that people understand what's happening and why it's happening, and what sort of the check marks are, both on our side and for the state. But community development is huge in this whole process. And I think that would be a really big piece of sort of redoing the plan, or taking a look at and revamping the plan, is making sure that everybody has that chance to be involved. And community engagement is huge to me. That's, one of the reasons why I like communications. It's all about, let's talk to the people, see what they think, not just, it's a conversation to have. So
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of it.
And maybe, I tend to like dealing on the conceptual level, but I think you need to present people with something that they can see, something that they can take in through their senses. And, one thought I have is that you take a neighborhood, West Concord seems to be more open-minded than some places, and you take some neighborhood, some part of West Concord, and, you come up with a few different ideas for a set of streets on what could happen. And then you engage the neighborhood, you engage the town around a discussion on that, and say, well, this is what we're talking about. These were the goals we set. If you have a better idea, put it on the table. But if you want the streets to be safer, if you want, all these things that we laid out, this is the discussion we need to have.
Yeah, I think too that there's a lot of different options, especially I'm sure some of you remember when we were applying for the Shared Streets and Spaces grants. I did those graphic representations of Concord Center with the different types of pavements. We could do things like that and show different options to sort of gauge the larger community and say, what are you interested in? Do you like the idea of having painted bike lanes? Do you like the idea of having all the parking be behind buildings and commercial areas? There's different ways to do it, to sort of to get that input, so that you're getting different people too. So it's not just people have to go to the neighborhood to see it, but they can also view it online as well, and makes it easy.
Yeah. Phil?
So I think this is a great discussion, and I agree with you 100%, Nick, that the role that we can play is to pursue public engagement. One of the things that is a part of doing this well, I think, is not just asking people, well, what do you want? Because people really won't know exactly what they want. They don't even know the context. They don't even know why it's necessarily a good idea. So I think it might be useful for us to engage somebody who's kind of an evangelist for this kind of stuff, as a consultant, either just as a one-off to help us formulate how we can reach out to the public in an effective way and educate them along the way. And then how we can actually carry it out. So it's a multiple part process where we reach out to, a consultant or a group, and there are lots of them in Massachusetts, of course. The second is to reach out to the public and provide them with information even before we will have a sit down. And then, in my dream come true scenario, we would have public forums where people come in, or either in person or on Zoom, and have the opportunity to see the kinds of things that Erin is talking about, actually see it, have pictures of it, or maybe even walk around. One of the really effective things that occurred in the last year was we had the walk around with the West Concord Advisory Committee. And I think, Erin, you were there, and I'm pretty sure you were there, Terry. And we were just walking up and down Main Street and Commonwealth Avenue and observing what we actually could see. Events like that, I think, really help people to understand why this stuff is consistent with what people have always told me. They're concerned about safety. That's always the first thing that comes off people's mouths is, we're concerned about safety. We're concerned, about getting hit by a car or a truck, and we need to do something about it. And then, maybe the next thing is concerned about promotion of the aesthetic and business environment. And, maybe the next thing is, fixing the potholes. So
At least sustainability comes in there somewhere.
yeah, and sustainability comes in there somewhere too, right? Where, we're trying to, encourage people to use an alternative to cars to get from one place to another for short trips. So I totally agree. And, my thinking is that we could probably get, for relatively short money, a consultant to help us think about this so we can take steps effectively.
Yes, Laura?
Well, I'll let Dan go because I've talked a lot at this meeting.
Wait, yeah, I'm curious. I mean, excuse my naivete, but it sounds like the Hubbard Street situation gives us a real classroom exposure to what some of the pitfalls are. And I mean, from the little I know about it, there were lots of the aspects of it that were viewed very favorably, but the entire package, the lining, the difference, some of the changes were what really put people off and has gotten, created the problems here. So, I mean, I think we have something that we can look at right in front of us right now.
Yep, we do.
That may help,
agree.
In terms of just figuring out how to better present this. But, the fact is that it's a complete streets program. It's not, you get new pavement, new sidewalks. It's complete streets. It's the whole package. So,
I'm just curious, Dan, have you walked down Hubbard Street since it was repaved?
Not since it's been completed. No, I was there a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I was too. I mean, I think that, I'm sort of similar to Erin. I tend to run into work, so I may need to be prevented from doing that occasionally. But I mean, I think that the idea of engaging the Hubbard Street community on a wide-ranging complete streets vision for the town might be too late. The physical infrastructure is set. There are different design choices that could have been made earlier, and I wouldn't want to make the residents upset that they didn't get bump outs to make their crosswalks safer. Like I wouldn't want to show them a bunch of things at this stage that they can't have for another 10 to 15 years or longer, depending on how long that street lasts. So I would say, I think that Hubbard Street would be a great place for us as a committee to go walk, to see like what is missing, what didn't work about this design, so that we can take that data as we go forward and then maybe pick a street that's desperately in need of repaving and really dig into that about like, what are the many possibilities here, and engaging in exactly what Nick said, multiple designs, maybe putting those into the physical space so people can interact with them, and then having real conversations about it. So, I mean, I approach everything with my community organizer hat on. So, the things that I see as our role as a committee, coming back to Erin's initial question, a consultant is going to come in with a lot of great information, best practices, things that have worked in other communities, lots of, studies, data, really great, rich information. What we as the TAC have are connections in the local community, years of experience walking and biking in this community, and a knowledge of which neighborhoods need to be engaged, first, because they are a priority, because they're like in dire need of complete streets. So I would say, like, what I would love for this committee to do is take on some of the work of having one-to-ones with, various community leaders. I think about like people who are deeply engaged in getting kids to and from school, people who are with the Disability Commission, folks who are with Minuteman ARC. I think that there are some leaders that we should be having one-to-ones with to really understand their perspectives. And I think that, each of us could take one of those and then report back at a meeting. I love the idea of listening sessions, kind of like focused public forums, not just like invite everybody in town, but like, here's a neighborhood. Let's try to get everybody together on a street to talk about what might happen. Also listening sessions with committees, that might be a really great use for us. Yeah, so I mean, like one-to-ones, listening sessions, public forums, like Phil said. I would think that this committee would be the right place to initiate some of those and put a little elbow grease into it. Although, like I said, I run towards work, which is not always the best. I do have a full-time job and a 4-year-old. So, there is a limit to how much I can do in a day.
So could I ask you a question just for all of us? It sounds as if the impression is that Hubbard Street is sort of a lost cause as far as complete streets is concerned. I'm not sure.
I think that's
So
Why do you think that?
No, I don't think that's what was said. I think what's true is that there's a situation there that's being managed. It has to be managed. There's some misset expectations or upset or whatever. And
Okay.
I don't think us jumping into it to get involved at this point is going to help the situation. We're coming in too late. We should be thinking more from street. We should learn
Nick,
from what's happened there.
Yeah, no, that was my point, Nick. I wasn't proposing that we act as mediators or anything.
Right.
I think that there's a lesson to be learned from what
Right.
happened.
Exactly that. There's a lesson to be learned, and I think our role is to witness what happens, and if we're called upon to, give advice or help, fine, but not insert ourselves.
And I think I'll mention too that nobody who was a part of that project when it first started is still with the town. So we can't speak to what happened in the past. We're just trying to make sure that going forward, things happen in a more pleasant way, that people are informed of what's happening and what the Complete Streets is, and trying to make the best of, trying to make sure that, what happens on Hubbard is setting a good precedent for what happens in the rest of town. Because we certainly don't want to say, okay, we're going to just, no complete streets, we're not going to do anything, because that sets a poor precedent for the rest of the town, especially since we want to be making sure that anybody who is coming down that street has the ability to use it on whatever form of transportation they're choosing to use, and that we have that sort of larger connection goal. And I think that that's key, is that it wasn't really described as holistically as it should have been, and there wasn't as much communication towards the beginning as to what the process was and what was involved in it. It was all kind of a I hope I'm not mischaracterizing it, but it was kind of a, let's sign up for this and we'll talk about what the details are later. That is part of my understanding. That may not be completely true, but I think that there's a lot of miscommunication that happens, and we're trying to backpedal and make sure that we have a good outcome so that we can move forward and have a really positive experience with Complete Streets moving forward.
I think it also, though, highlights the point that, it's not appropriate for everywhere. And, if there are sections of town where, it's explored and it's determined that, people aren't willing to make the sacrifices, then those have to be dismissed as well.
Well, I don't know. I mean, if you're talking about like a whole neighborhood, yeah, that may be true, but that might help us prioritize for sure. We're not going to have money to do everything at once everywhere. So, community engagement and willingness to participate is important. But I'll also say that I know of places where there's extreme danger because of the way the road is constructed. And, in a sense, whether or not the abutter cares, I mean, we're talking about life and safety. So,
But that does trump that does take precedence for sure.
So I think, yeah, so I agree with what you're saying in a big picture, a whole neighborhood or something, but there are places where we have to make, the town has to make some decisions for the sake of public safety.
And I think that it's important. I think it's the role of this committee to look at the town holistically. It's very easy if you just drive your car and you live on a street to say, we don't need all this other infrastructure, but that's a person who owns a personal vehicle, maybe isn't disabled. Like we need to be thinking about holistic approaches to connectivity, because if one street that's a main artery between two sides of the town say we don't want complete streets, that could mean that there's no way for a whole neighborhood to get somewhere safely. So I think that that's our role at the Transportation Advisory Committee, is trying to come up with the holistic plan and prioritize based on the necessity of complete streets on that particular road. Hubbard Street is just a side street. So it's
calling it safe streets.
Yes. I think there's a lot of public education that needs to happen, which is one of the reasons I think we should partner with the Comprehensive Sustainability and Energy Committee on this, particularly because they are practiced in doing forums, inviting an expert, having a forum, having a Q&A session, having people tabling afterwards so there can be discussion. I think that as much public education, as much public conversation as we can have as possible is really essential for this.
Okay. So Erin, has that been helpful?
Yeah, I think so. I think that as we, sort of look towards possibly doing this plan renewal, I think that, having the support from the TAC is going to be huge, especially since you're definitely going to be helping out with it. So it's something that I think will be, I'm sure will be coming up again. And, I think that this is sort of the plan renewal, sort of the first step towards doing a whole lot more. There's a lot of money that we're kind of going to be leaving on the table until we can make sure that we have a good plan going forward. So I think that the sooner that we can sort of look at that and start sort of figuring out what our plans are going to be, the better off we will be in the long run.
I think one thing, aside from all that we've just talked about, one thing we could spend money on wisely and will need is information. I would not be reluctant to engage in a process with consultants and pulling together information that we know we will need in a year or so to help us make decisions, and safety might be one of those areas where we can begin to pull together information to understand, to help us later.
Yeah, data gathering is huge, and we don't necessarily have the right data that we're finding when we're going to apply for grants, and we have some, but we don't necessarily have the right data, or it was done.
And it's scattered all over the place. I was sort of surprised to discover when I approached the police department about finding out about accident data is, well, we just send that to the state police. We don't put it in a database. And then trying to get it back out of the state police is another project. So they claim it's easy, but I went to their website that isn't. So yeah, there's work for someone to do there.
This is a related question, but I think it would be really valuable for us to have the complete streets best practice policy and implementation practices manual available to all members of the Transportation Advisory Committee.
I got it.
Oh, great. The American Planning Association has a whole manual on how to do this, including how does a town implement a complete streets plan, not just a plan, but policy, which involves many steps. So I am hoping to read it, and I think it would be great for as many of us to at least skim it as we can, so that we're fully prepared to engage in a process of
Right.
renewal.
I can provide that. I don't think that I can post it online. I don't think that the APA would be very happy since they receive money for people buying it, but I can loan it out to all of you if you want to take a look at it.
Okay. On August 6th, what time of day is that?
That's a great question. I want to say that it starts at 1, but I'll have to double check.
Oh, really? Afternoon only?
I think so, but I have to double check.
Okay, yeah, let us
that's
know.
the number in my head.
Okay, I blocked off the whole day. Thanks. Okay, so we wrap that up. Safe routes to school. So Phil has been leading an effort to get us involved and get the town, I would say, help the town develop a coherent approach to accessing the resources that might be available to us from the federally funded Safe Routes to School pots of money. And along those lines, I'll let Phil lead the discussion. Just say he and I had a conversation with someone who's involved at the state level, and Phil can update you on what happened, and we can talk about it. Phil?
Okay, thanks. So Nick and I had a conversation at midday with Rachel O'Donnell. Rachel is a contractor actually, but she works for, her company works for MassDOT on the Safe Routes to School program. Rachel is one of, I think, 7 or 8 contractors that MassDOT has engaged to do the outreach and assistance work that she undertakes. I've been working with her, not as part of this committee, but as part of the Bike to School initiative for a couple of years. And she's really very helpful, always available to, answer questions and, help to develop programs in the town. So the first thing that we've done in the town in undertaking Safe Routes to School is to participate in several of the events that Safe Routes sponsors basically on a national basis. So those events are the one-day events that we've undertaken in the spring and the fall at each of the primary schools in town for the last couple of years. And in addition, we've at least provided some safety curriculum to each of the primary school principals. And to be honest with you, I don't know whether or not that curriculum has actually been taught by the PE teacher has been the lead in each of the primary schools. But I don't know whether or not they've had a safety day or a bike day or a walk to school day. In any event, the next step in this program would be for the town to undertake what the national program calls a Safe Routes to School task force. So Nick and I discussed with Rachel today, well, what is a task force and how do you implement it and what are the steps? And her response was that it's a fairly flexible thing. She gave us the name of a number of different municipalities, which are relatively close by and similar to Concord, that have undertaken task forces. One of them is Lexington, another one is Burlington, another one is Bedford, another one is Holliston. And each of those towns have created some, I guess my understanding of it is it's not a committee, it's more of an initiative or a program that either a municipal agency or a municipal committee undertakes. And that program includes identifying routes that school children take to get from the neighborhoods that they live in to the primary school and the middle school. It also includes identifying where traffic occurs as a result of kids getting to and from school. So just to give you a real life example, a couple of years ago, because of the pandemic and because the school department decided that they wanted to promote social distancing on the school buses, they asked the parents to opt out of having their children take the school bus to school. So for the Thoreau School District, what happened was that the number of school children in the buses was reduced. And in order for the kids to get to school, their parents drove them to school. And that resulted in a queue of cars. I counted them, and I know that the school principal at Thoreau counted them. So there were about 75 cars queued up, snaking from the school, Thoreau School, down, I think it's Central Street, and then going down the various little side streets in that neighborhood, if you're familiar with it. So not only did you have a lot of cars, but you had a lot of cars idling for an extended period of time as the parents queued up, waiting for their turn to drop off their children. And the same number of, and potential safety issues with conflicts between cars and school buses and other vehicles going on those relatively small and narrow streets. And then the same thing happened at dismissal time, where you had a fairly lengthy queue of cars, all of which were idling, and you had some air pollution issues, you had some neighbor concerns about having cars sitting in front of their houses for extended period of time, stuff like that. So sorry to be lengthy about this, but I was trying to give you an example. So what Safe Routes to School would do as part of a task force is identify situations like that, and then have either neighborhood meetings or have people from the state. So MassDOT will send staff people down to take a look at a situation like that one, make recommendations as to how to alleviate a situation like that, or at least mitigate the air pollution dimension of it, right? Where you have people who are idling in their cars who might be encouraged to shut them off. And then maybe the more holistic picture is encouraging the children to ride or walk to school to reduce the number of cars in that queue. And that's really where the rubber hits the road with this program, which is getting people to think about and feel comfortable with an alternative to both the school bus and the single passenger car in terms of getting their kids to school. And at least with respect to the Thoreau School, it's I think it's generally a safe and comfortable place for a lot of kids to get to school, because it's a compact neighborhood with a school that's kind of buried back there. And the key safety issue is getting across Route 62, because Route 62 is a major commuter artery in the morning and in the afternoon. As it turns out, we've had difficulty recruiting crossing guards. So, the police have had to step in to control traffic on Route 62. And so the Safe Routes program would undertake to think about options for addressing a situation like that. Can we slow traffic down on Route 62, for example? Can we do some road modifications that would, coax people into slowing down? Should we increase enforcement? Something that the police department might get involved in. So, there's a lot of different ways to try to address what is the bigger goal of safely having school children, get from home to school on a daily basis throughout the year in a way that achieves the goal of reducing number of car trips, and maybe even reducing our need for school buses. So if it turns out that we could use only 4 school buses instead of 6 school buses or 7 school buses in order to safely get the school population over to Thoreau, that's a fairly substantial savings of money. And I think it's a great benefit for the town to, have alternatives that people feel comfortable with and buy into. So bottom line, just like the complete streets idea, the idea of a task force, I think, would ultimately be providing a way to communicate information to the public, bringing the public into some of these ideas, giving them information that, I think is consistent with safety and comfort and, good health, best practices, and environmental protection, and seeing if the combination of our efforts results in actions that are, less traffic, more walking, more biking, and, hopefully better safety at the same time. So that's the idea of the task force, I think, is to, eventually end up with the same kind of public forum, similar type of idea to the complete streets, where we bring people in and give them information and an opportunity to engage. The good thing about the Safe Routes to School program is it's backed with money. So the more that we do at the local level to undertake the various steps, the more likely it is that the town will get grants. And the grants are fall into two categories. One are quickie grants, which are called signs and lines grants. Those are up to $6,000. That's paint on the street and signs. And then there are bigger grants called infrastructure grants. Those are up to $1 million. And that's real serious infrastructure money, where that money could be combined potentially with other state funds and municipal funds to do road improvements that are consistent with safety, but, keyed to the idea of getting school children safely from their neighborhoods to the school by the means of walking and biking or some other, non-car mobility device. Sorry for rattling on, but hopefully that wasn't too much.
Okay. So I hear some similarities to complete streets.
Yeah, very similar ideas. Yeah.
Okay. It seems to me that we aren't quite ready to have a task force, that we need, I think we need something clear from the school department, which they may already have done, in terms of what support and what their priorities are, what their support is, and how they would manage that sort of across the schools. So, for instance, where do they see the biggest need? And that's the first thing. We aren't the people to say where the biggest need is from the school side, right? That's up to the school department to say. So I think there's something in terms of getting this started and maybe getting to the point where we could say, okay, let's get a task force together. I think we need something a little clearer, a clearer understanding. It may just be that we lack understanding, but a clearer understanding of how the school department sees this and, where they think the attention is needed. Now, Erin, as our staff person, what do you know about the school department in that regard?
Yeah, so I know that the school, I've had conversations with Lori Hunter. I know that the school is obviously very in support of the program. It's, how could you not be? But I think that there's a lack of, like you said, sort of like a lack of knowledge of what necessarily needs to happen and from the town side. I think that it really needs to, in a lot of ways, be led by the schools, because we don't necessarily, as a town committee, have that information at the tip of our, at our fingertips, and know, well, these are the issue areas, or these are the things that need to be happening. So I think that a larger conversation would have to happen with the school, and make sure that they're really on board to be a part of this. Because I think one of my concerns would be that, we really get into the weeds, and then, we get one of the biggest hurdles that we've had with working with the schools in the past year or two has been, we start going on a project and then another COVID surge hits. and things get knocked so far back that we're months behind in trying to figure things out. So I think that, a larger conversation would have to happen with the school to see if, they're ready to do something like this, because this would be a big lift on their side. Because if you don't have the buy-in from the school, I think there's a big issue there. From the town side, I have concerns about having another committee, even if it is a task force. That's a lot of additional work on the town staff. Overall, we're very we're overworked, and there's not enough people.
Understaffed too.
Yeah. There's, like in engineering, that they're missing somebody, and we're starting to get back up to numbers, but there's also a lot of new people that are trying to get their legs under them. And there's already so many boards and committees that it makes me nervous to start talking about bringing up another one. Whereas I think that a lot of what you talked about, Phil, a lot of that could be done, working with the schools. And a lot of those conversations are probably things that are already going to be brought to TAC, or, so we might be sort of a good sounding board, at least to start with. Those are sort of my initial thoughts from the.
Aaron, they have a transportation manager. Is that transportation manager just a school bus manager, or is it really a transportation manager that looks at bigger issues of transportation?
I believe that he mostly works on working with the buses, but I believe that he also looks at other methods of getting kids to school as well. It's not just buses, but that would be, I don't know his job description that closely.
Okay. So it might be that our first step is to engage with that person, confirm that person's the scope of what they're supposed to be doing, and then engage with that person to understand how they see this, right? How they see safe, if they understand even what it is. So to assess the situation, right?
I do have two clarifying questions, if I may.
Go ahead.
The first clarifying question is, I think I was understanding you, Phil, when you said that creating a task force opens up money for the program. Is that a necessary step, or it's just that the work needs to be done? I just want to clarify that.
So the way that Rachel described it today is that the MassDOT, when it provides grants, will look at participation in their various initiatives, including Safe Routes to School. If you want to get a Safe Routes to School grant, by doing the steps that are set out in the State Routes program, you will basically increase your score, increase your likelihood of getting a grant. If you don't participate, then you won't. But I want to clarify something, Aaron and Nick. I'm not suggesting that we create a committee. I don't think that a task force is a committee. I think of it, because I was thinking about this after our conversation, I think of it as a project for this committee, something that we undertake. Not, we don't need to staff it. We have, any number of volunteers who can provide information, and we can get information from the public. But
someone has to do all that work, the getting of the information.
Well, that's
I don't see
kind of is our job, right? That's why we're here sitting on Zoom. Is that?
Well, no, our job.
We put our hands up to do stuff.
Aaron's job as a staff person is our access to information. I am not supposed to have conversations with departments.
Well, I'm not suggesting we have a conversation with any department, actually, other than maybe Lori Hunter or John Arena, who's the transportation staff person for the school department. But, I can say, having participated in the program and talked with folks from other towns who participated in the program, a lot of what happens is it is not a committee. Okay, it is, some of it is task-based, some of it does involve staff time, but a large part of what gets undertaken in these initiatives is done on a volunteer basis by either a town committee or by a nonprofit or by a citizens committee like, the Concord Bike to School Committee. I mean, that's a group of 30 different people, mostly parents, who have made the program run for the last couple of years. And I think all of us who've participated in that program would like to see the school department participate more, but we haven't waited for the school department to participate more. We've said, we'll do this for you. And, if you want to participate, that's great. And if you want to know more, that's great. And, we'll try to connect you with the people.
Right, but that's not the level of participation that you say the Department of Transportation is looking for, right?
Well, not necessarily. I think, based on my conversation today with Rachel, she said there's lots of different ways that various towns have undertaken this. And, I'm willing to make calls to the 4 different towns that she mentioned and ask people, what did you do? Who was involved? What did it actually take to get from, step 1 to step 2 to step 3? And then, I can bring that information back for us to evaluate and see whether or not it is in fact burdensome, which, I'm certainly willing to concede that, it could be burdensome. And I'm certainly understanding of Erin's concern that it become an issue of overburdening our staff. I don't want to see that happen, but I think at least we can gather some information and see how it might be done. And I can tell you that at least in terms of the first steps, engaging with the CPD has been very straightforward. We've asked CPD, would you be willing to provide officers for the Bike to School event? And CPD has said, sure, no problem. And, it hasn't been burdensome for them. My sense is that if there was a potential for assistance from state level for providing some engineering and consulting, CPW might consider it as well. If it's something that they're already, tasked with doing or might be tasked with doing at some future point. If the state said, well, we're willing to come in and provide you some information about how to alleviate a traffic jam in the Thoreau School District neighborhood, CPW might say, great, or they may say, no, we're just, we haven't programmed for it.
First,
we don't know.
First, at the moment, they're understaffed. Second, the first thing they're going to say is, does the schools department support this? Where's the school department plan that says that we need it? Right?
Well, I can tell you that the governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts supports it, and the secretary of the Department of Transportation.
I don't see the governor sitting here helping us. Okay, I don't see the governor doing any work for us, so I don't care what the governor thinks. What I care about is whether the school department is supporting this and whether they're going to put the work in.
So let's have a conversation. Let's have a conversation with Lori. I mean, that's to me, what I'm hearing this evening, Nick, is no, I can't, I won't, I don't wanna. It's hard. It's going to take time, and that's not how we're going to get this done.
You're putting words in my mouth. What I'm saying, analogously, to give you an image, is I am not interested in trying to push a string across a table. I need somebody pulling the string on the other side. I need the school department to say, we're on board with this program. We see the benefit to it. TAC, help us. Okay, that's what I want to see. Laura?
I just want to, pull us back here and say, Safe Routes to School is a wonderful program, and Concord is already doing many of the things. This is not like a new thing. We're not talking about starting a new program. I think that it's very worthwhile for us as a committee to look at the tools that, like I keep saying, we don't have to reinvent wheels here. Like Safe Routes to School has wonderful surveys for parents and parents, students, and administrators. And it's just a matter of getting people to fill out those like that's one of the main steps of Safe Routes.
Just a matter of getting people to do work. Yes.
Well, I mean, and just to give you a little context, I worked with one other volunteer before I had joined any kind of town committee and collected 400 survey responses from parents through an email. Like, it's not, there are ways to get parents and students especially to fill out surveys about their behaviors going to school. And data collection is something that we need to do as a committee. I think it's a valuable thing for us to do. I think that the idea that we would create a long-term subcommittee on safe routes to school feels outside the scope of what this committee has the capacity for right now, given that we're just 4 members, soon to be 5, Mark. But I think that there's a lot to be said about the Safe Routes to School program. And I would be personally very interested in having conversations with some of the stakeholders about collecting this information that you're saying about, like, what is their excitement around this program? What is their need? Where are the greatest areas of need in town? Because I know, having sat in on many sustainability committee meetings at the district, school district, these are conversations that are being had. It's not like we would be approaching them with a novel idea. So I think it's just a matter of finding out what's happening there, being willing to talk more about it. I don't think that we have to make a decision about whether, I don't think we can start. I'm also not for starting a whole new committee. I don't think that that's an
No, I
efficient
don't think we need
time.
to. That's what I
Bill's
said.
not asking for that. He's clear on that.
Nick, I fully agree with you in that we're not going to force this down their throat. And unless we get a buy-in from the schools, it's just not going to be feasible. It's a wonderful program. And, our task, if anything, is to give the schools or give Lori Hunter or whoever is going to implement this, support. But going forward, it's got to be manned by them. We don't have the manpower. The town in toto doesn't have the manpower. It's got to be school centric, because ultimately it's all about them running what's happening with their students.
Now, Aaron, you have been trying to connect up with the schools, right? And could you just give an update on that?
Yeah, so I talked to, geez, when was it? What month is it? July. I talked to them last month. I think it was right when school was ending. But of course, it's difficult to connect again come summer when they finally get a break. But they're very interested, and I think that the initial reaction was, aren't we already doing this? Because we have, as a town, signed on to Safe Routes to School. We are a Safe Routes to School community. And we filed for a grant, or applied for a grant last year. And I do want to mention, so I went through the grant process and what is required for that. So one of the things that Mass DOT does is they want to be very clear about what their expectations are going in. So if you, for instance, for complete streets, you cannot apply for you cannot apply for a complete streets project or for funding unless you have become a complete streets community and have adopted a policy on complete streets. But it also means that when you are going through the application, you have to check off saying, yes, we are a complete streets community. Yes, we have a complete streets policy. The same is true for the Safe Routes to School, from what I saw from the grant applications. So one of the things is, do you have buy-in from the school? Like, the school is, is on board with this with this grant application. You are a Safe Routes to School community. You've done community engagement. It didn't say anything specific about having a task force. So I think that, and based on their website, it says that it can help streamline the process, but that it's not necessary. It's not necessary for going through and applying for grants or anything like that. So I think that's an important thing to note too, is that, I think that in a lot of ways, while we definitely should be connecting the school and making sure that, they're the driving force behind this, that they're all for it, but that the TAC, I think, can take on some of the projects and things like that are under the Safe Routes to School umbrella.
Okay, so it sounds like we've got maybe a timing issue with school vacations and staff being exhausted after the past 2 years. So will you take it on as an action then to make that connection to Lori, or the transportation manager forever and find out exactly where Safe Routes to School fits in terms of their objectives and goals and who owns it there?
Yeah,
And-
I can connect back up with them.
Okay.
I have an email chain going. So.
Okay. And yeah, and supporting what Phil said, I mean, part of what we heard today was that different communities solve this problem of how to organize to implement in different ways. In one community, I think it was Holliston, it was all town staff that did it. In some of the other communities like Lexington, it was different. You know, it included citizens. So, okay, so so I guess, Phil, I mean, I think we're all on board and wanting the town to participate as fully as possible in Safe Routes to School. It's important because it lines up totally with our objectives and goals, and also because the kids are really important. And, you know, we just want to support that. The only question in my mind is, how do we do that in the way that's most efficient and aligned with the school department and their priorities? Because, you know, I don't want to, you know, you can do some minor programs with the school department saying, yeah, sure, go ahead and do it. But that's not what we're going to need in the long run. We're going to need them really totally on board. Laura?
I just want to offer, like, the thing about Safe Routes to School and Complete Streets, as has been pointed out during this conversation, they're very highly overlapping. And I think one of the things for us as a committee to keep in mind is, if there are places where a Safe Routes to School program, like 62 is a great example. 62, as Phil has pointed out, very difficult for kids to cross that to go to school. I take my son on 62 to school every day on our bicycle. So not now, but during the school year. So I know how dangerous that road is. It's also a major connecting road between West Concord and Maynard. There's a lot of people who travel on that to go to the train. And I think that thinking about where those two pieces obviously overlap, I mean, it makes prioritization a much easier task, because you're like, well, if it's a complete streets priority and it's a Safe Routes to School priority, this is obviously a great place for us as a committee to focus our time on building community engagement, like with neighbors along 62 as an example. So I think that might be a really great way for us to think about this program going forward, is like, where do we find those areas of synergy? Because we're already participating in this program, we're already participating in the Complete Streets program. And I think that sort of getting the most bang for your buck out of these programs is really great. I hate that expression, but you know what I mean.
Yes. There's an interesting thing popped into my mind as you're talking about Route 62 is I'm not at all sure to what degree the fact that it's a state highway and we have taken money, I think it was about 10 years ago, there was a lot of major state money spent on improvements on Route 62 all the way from the Acton town line into West Concord. There was a lot of construction done, sidewalks, everything with state funds. There's an interesting question on how we then make changes to Route 62 for a safety standpoint, from a complete street standpoint, given that it's sort of like the MBTA thing. Is it really our road or isn't it? Especially since we took money to do upgrades to it. I think I'm interested in that topic. I'll talk to Ellen Cathcart, or actually, well, Ellen, Steve, someone, and find out a little bit more about that. I think we need to understand that more.
It's a complicated relationship. That's what I can tell you.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Sure it is. Once you take money from somebody to do something, you have an interesting relationship. You're kind of working for them. Okay.
So,
Okay.
I will say on that particular point that I think that the state has kind of drunk the Kool-Aid in terms of safety.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So, you know, that what their policy might have been 10 years ago or 15 years ago might be very different today in terms of safety improvements.
Yeah, no, my only question is there's a whole thing about the state funding for those road improvements on the state highways. I think it's called CAP or something, the program name. And I'd like to know more about that, because I think we need to know more about that. Yeah. Okay. So, so that's that. Any final comments on that? Okay. So moving on, next topic. Liaison observer comments. Who's out there tonight? Mark? Mark, how you doing? Any comments?
Okay, you want public comments?
Public comments. Yeah, you're not.
Since I'm a member. Okay, well, a couple of things. One thing about safe routes to school, and the other one about MBTA. So I was just searching online a little bit. So I mean, it seems like, and you know, maybe Aaron and Phil and Laura can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like the Mass dot Safe Routes to School program has two separate pieces, and one of them is a lot of information and training and stuff, and the other one is some infrastructure funding. I can actually send Nick this page. Maybe people are familiar with it, but there's a document about infrastructure application guidance document, and what it says is program overview. Non-infrastructure component encourages elementary and middle school students to use active transportation, et cetera, by implementing education, encouragement, engagement, evaluation practices and programs. Then there's a second part, which is infrastructure component, comprises the engineering aspect of 6Es and involves equity lens as well. So if it looks to me, just glancing through this, that if there were locations identified where some funding was needed to fix an intersection or something that's related to safety going to school, and we're already members of the educational, part of this, that it's a possible source of funding for that. So you're kind of working backward from something specific that the town might already know that they want, and just plug in funding for it from this source might be something that reduces the work needed. I'll hold my comment on the MBTA in case somebody wants to kick in or question something.
So we submitted a grant. Engineering submitted a grant last year after working with the school and the police on extension of the sidewalk on Lexington and a crosswalk to Haywood, I think. And that was submitted last year for that infrastructure. It was something like 114,000, 116,000, something like that. They are need-based, as most, as many grants are. So we weren't afforded that one, but it's definitely something that, if there are needs when the grants open up, we can certainly apply to them. And that's one of the reasons why we want to make sure that we're paying attention and we're ready, and having the school have a prioritized list of things that we know that there's a real need for crosswalk here, or this blind corner is always scaring kids, things like that. If those can be sort of prioritized, and that's a great way to make sure that when grants open up, because you have some regularity with grants, really depends on the grant. But we might know, every spring this opens up or something like that. And to have a list ready, then we're ready to go then.
And what you meant by needs-based was that if all the other communities that applied had more financial need than Concord does, then they get first shot at it, and we sort of fall off the bottom of the list, right? That's what
me.
Yeah, that's what needs-based means. That community.
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily needs-based, but it's a lot of time it's not based on do you want it, then you get it, but it's a lot of times there's, let's say 50 communities, and there's some that are make a better case because there's a really they have to, making this up, they have to cross the highway, and that's a much scarier, much more pressing issue than that may get funded before something. If we just need a crosswalk, things like that, things that are seen as a lesser priority.
Okay, Mark, your second thing.
I was going to say that, yeah. So anyway, I'll send the link to this document to Nick, and maybe he can send it around, because I kind of like reading guidance documents rather than web pages that link one page to another, and you can't, and it looks, it's sort of all glossy and doesn't really, so this is not a technical document, but it seems pretty formal. I think it'd be useful. So again, kind of separate, getting more people like on the committee and everybody involved to make sure we're all on the same page. Like what Aaron is saying, that there are these grants and they're one opportunity. It does talk about an equity lens, and then it talks about needs. So these can be interpreted in different ways. So I'll send that to Nick. I think it's interesting to clarify those two things. With regard to the MBTA, I've kind of spoken about it before, but I'm still kind of processing it in my mind. But reasons that the MBTA should care, the Fitchburg line, I believe, the MBTA website is very confusing because it's not well documented. So depending which page you turn to, you get different numbers of how many stops on the Fitchburg line are accessible compared to the total number of stops. And there are 2 non-accessible stops that have been closed down due to lack of ridership, at least. But basically, it's got 17 stops, and I think 10 are accessible or something. And whereas like the Newburyport line has, I don't know, quite a few stops, and only 1 is non-accessible. Concord, of course, has 2 stops. It's an excuse for not making it accessible, but one thought would be, and again, this is a little broader for the TAC, but I think there's a relation, would be to coordinate with other communities on the Fitchburg line that have non-accessible location and say, all of this should really be accessible. What's going on? Another thing is they talk about ridership and the local communities, but Concord is a destination people want to come to. And it fits in with economic vitality and with tourism, which is a big deal. And this ties into another aspect, which is there's this sort of mysterious thing called Revolution 250 about the anniversary, 250th anniversary of what happened at the bridge and all that, and in Lexington. And some people say there's going to be big crowds, and there probably will be, but there's a Boston organization, Mike Barrett, got seats on the committee for Concord. I think Mike Lawson is on it. I'm not sure if I got that right. Maybe the MBTA would like to show a better face in terms of people being able to come from Boston out to Concord during that celebration. And, I don't know if I don't know how to move the MBTA, but I'm just saying that having everybody drive out here compared to taking trains. Another thing would be that to think about if the only accessible, equitable for everybody platform is in West Concord, that during that celebration, we ought to have extra shuttles to tying in from West Concord where people in a wheelchair can come to things. Lastly, with respect to the MBTA, I just kind of checked some facts. So in August 2017, a 15-year-old cyclist died after being hit by a train crossing his bike from one side of the West Concord station to another. So that might be actually the place where the Bruce Freeman committee focusing on Junction Park was saying we need to have some flashing lights or something. So there, was a fatality there, exactly there in 2017. In 2020, more recently, there was an 18-year-old pedestrian killed, but that was at Conant Street at 11:30 p.m. and he was apparently walking on the tracks. I don't have a police report, but rough details. But there was also a case of a 70-year-old pedestrian struck in May of 2019 on Sudbury by the Thorough depot. So, there's safety problems that involve MBTA trains, and maybe somehow this can all be put into some package that somebody can do something with. So that's all. A great conversation. Thanks. Look forward to participating in deliberations in the not too far future.
Thank you. Carlin, you're next.
Thanks, Carlin Reed, 83 with Send. Nick, you have piqued my interest. What's going on with Hubbard Street? I walk that, I've watched it develop, but I love the way that it's been paved. I see the new curbs. I see they're working on the sidewalks. What's wrong with Hubbard Street? Or maybe that's not the right way to phrase it, but what are some of the current issues with that Hubbard Street?
A quick answer is that a few years ago, the town obtained Complete Streets funding for the state for a few projects, one of which was way up on Sudbury Road near Ornack. And the other main one was, there were three of them. I forget the third one. The second one was
Commonwealth
Hubbard.
There's
Commonwealth,
Hubbard.
right,
And yeah,
and Hubbard Street. And they were going to be doing a repaving project there, so it was good time to do it. The problem, as it turns out now, is basically all the paving and infrastructure work has been done, and the neighborhood is claiming they want nothing to do with pavement markings. That's my hearing of it, that they don't really want all that other stuff that's supposed to go with the program. But the town obtained funding based on that, so there's a bit of a problem. So that's what the issue is, my version of it, on what's happening in Hubbard Street. So that needs to be worked through with the residents. Anything else, Carlin?
No, that's it. Thanks much.
Okay. Okay, and moving on to Laura, did you have something to say before we go to Terry?
No, go ahead, Terry.
Okay, your hand's up.
I'll go after Terry.
Oh, okay, go ahead, Terry.
Just very quickly, great discussion tonight. Really enjoyed it. A lot of good thoughts. Just to answer Laura's question from early in the meeting. Laura, you were, I think, asking what the Junction Park recommendations are. And they're on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail website, the entire report. And the executive summary has the recommendations right on one of the first pages. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Terry.
My question is purely administrative, which is, I have not been keeping up with the legislature's extension of whether we're still allowed to meet on, are we still allowed to meet on Zoom for our next meeting?
Go ahead, Terry.
Right. The legislature has not decided yet. The House passed one version. The Senate passed another version. They have to go to conference committee. The current legislation expires this Friday. So stay tuned. We're recommending that everybody advertise your next meeting in person, but you might get to change it if the legislature gets its act together before that.
yeah, because ours is going to take a while till we get to the next one. We're probably okay. We'll find out before, most likely. But if not, yeah, we'll have to post in person, and then we'll have to have a quorum in person. There still could be some people that were remote, but the chair and a quorum have to be present in person.
That's the current rules.
Yes, that is back to the basics, back to the original rules.
Okay, so we'll find out. Okay.
Can I
Mark,
just
did you have
mention
something else?
one thing? So I think a question came up about Hubbard Street and bump outs, and I do believe by the post office on Walden Street, there are bump outs already. I forget whether they have them further down, but there are no, last I saw, it's new blacktop and no markings whatsoever, parking or lanes. So I think, you know, that it'd be interesting to know if what was committed, Aaron, in the actual previous administration plan and how much was planned.
We don't want to get into that.
You know, well, I'm curious. Maybe Aaron can send.
I think
if you have it,
let's put it this way. All the people who got the money from the state have disappeared. The neighborhood,
we have the road.
the neighborhood says they know nothing about this, about what was going to happen. So it's kind of a mess. Okay.
Yeah, I just want to, if there are previous facts and drawings, I don't mind looking at them or talking to somebody. It's not necessary, but I am curious.
Yeah, the grant application was very broad, just sort of general complete streets, you know, looking to make things safer, I think. I had to reread it again, but it wasn't very specific, I think is the main issue. So it's a
Is there money? Is there money left over for paint or not?
There is money for paint, yes.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay, good meeting. Thank you all. And that's it.
You have to do a roll call vote.
Okay, roll call vote to adjourn. Motion to adjourn.
Motion, just started reading.
We'll take that as a motion in a second.
Second.
And let's see, roll call. Laura,
Aye, I gotta get my bike in out of the rain.
Dan,
Aye.
Phil,
Hi,
I'm an aye as well. Meeting is adjourned.
okay.
Thank
thanks,
you.
guys.
It
Bye.
is starting to rain, I believe, in Concord. Bye.